Have you ever wondered what happens behind closed doors? What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface of even the most picture-perfect relationships? Today, I'm sharing a deeply personal story, a journey that begins with love, twists through betrayal, and ends in unexpected hope. By the time you finish watching, you'll understand how trust can be rebuilt, why acceptance is so powerful, and how sometimes the hardest truths lead to the greatest transformations. Stick around until the end because this isn't just my story, it might change the way you see your own relationships forever. Welcome back to your channel name, where we dive into raw, real-life stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of thoughtful viewers who believe in learning from every chapter of life. Now, let me take you back to a time when everything seemed perfect, at least on the outside. Growing up, I always dreamed of having a loving family. You know, the kind you read about in books, the cozy home, laughter filling the air, someone by your side who truly gets you. And for a while, I thought I had found it. His name was Daniel, and he was everything I'd ever hoped for. Charming, kind, intelligent, he swept me off my feet from the moment we met. It wasn't love at first sight, but it grew into something deeper, something real. We built a life together, weekend hikes, lazy Sunday mornings, quiet nights talking about our dreams. To everyone else, including me, we were the definition of happiness. But looking back now, there were moments that didn't quite add up. Little things, like the way Daniel would sometimes seem distant after work or avoid certain social gatherings without explanation. Or the fact that, despite how much we cared for each other, intimacy between us faded over time. At the moment, I brushed these thoughts aside. After all, no relationship is perfect, right? And besides, everything else felt so flawless. What I didn't realize then was that those small cracks in the foundation were hinting at something far bigger than I could have imagined. Something that would test not only our marriage but also my ability to forgive, to accept, and ultimately, to love unconditionally. So, if you've ever questioned whether perfection really exists, or if you've faced challenges in your own relationships, you won't want to miss this. Stay tuned as I peel back the layers of a story that will leave you thinking long after the video ends. The cracks began to show slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. It wasn't one big moment that shattered the illusion of perfection, it was a series of small, nagging details that I couldn't quite ignore anymore. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just stress, or maybe my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew something was off. It started with the little things. Daniel would disappear for hours on weekends, claiming he needed space to think, or that he was catching up with old friends. When I asked who these friends were, he'd change the subject or give vague answers. Then there were the nights when he'd sit on the couch, scrolling through his phone for hours, barely acknowledging me. If I tried to ask what was wrong, he'd smile and say everything was fine, but his eyes never matched his words. At social gatherings, he became more withdrawn. We used to love hosting dinner parties, laughing with our friends late into the night. But over time, Daniel stopped wanting to attend. He'd make excuses, work deadlines, feeling tired, not in the mood, and eventually, I stopped inviting people altogether. The cozy home we once shared began to feel quieter, emptier, like a shadow had crept in without us noticing. And then there was the intimacy, or lack of it. In the early days of our marriage, we were inseparable. Every touch, every glance felt electric. But as the months went by, that spark dimmed. At first, I thought it was normal. Life gets busy, passion ebbs and flows. But even when we did try to reconnect, there was a distance between us, an invisible wall I couldn't break through. I remember lying awake one night, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside me. My mind raced with questions. Was it something I had done? Had I failed him somehow? Or was this just what happened after the honeymoon phase faded away? I wanted so badly to believe that everything was okay, that this was just a rough patch we'd get through together. But the doubt lingered, gnawing at me until I couldn't ignore it anymore. One evening, I decided to confront him. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us. I took a deep breath and said, "Daniel, is everything all right? You've seemed distant lately." He looked up from his coffee cup, startled, as if he hadn't expected me to notice. For a moment, I thought he might open up, tell me what was really going on. Instead, he forced a smile and shrugged it off. "It's just work," he said. "Things have been stressful, but I'll figure it out. Don't worry about me." I wanted to push further, to demand answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear of hearing something I wasn't ready for. So I nodded, accepted his explanation, and let the conversation die. But inside, the unease grew stronger. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the sound of his steady breathing, I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. There were too many unanswered questions, too many moments that didn't add up. And though I didn't know it yet, the truth was closer than I could have imagined, waiting to surface in a way that would change everything. The day I found out, I wasn't even looking for answers. It happened by accident, one of those moments that feel so ordinary at first but then turn your world upside down. I was cleaning out the guest room, a space Daniel rarely used, and decided to organize the closet. That's when I saw it, a small, unassuming box tucked away on the top shelf, hidden behind an old blanket. Something about it made my stomach tighten, though I couldn't say why. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the box like it might come alive if I touched it. My mind raced with excuses not to open it, maybe it was work-related, or just some random things he'd forgotten about. But curiosity got the better of me. Slowly, I reached up and pulled it down, setting it gently on the floor before lifting the lid. Inside were letters, handwritten notes folded neatly, each one addressed to someone named Alex. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the tone was intimate, filled with longing and affection. Phrases like, "I miss you," and "I wish things could be different," jumped off the page, making my chest ache with every word. There were also photographs tucked inside, showing Daniel smiling brightly in places I didn't recognize, arm in arm with another man. His expression was relaxed, happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. My hands trembled as I sifted through the contents, trying to piece together what I was seeing. At first, denial kicked in. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation, that this wasn't what it looked like. Maybe Alex was just a friend, or maybe these were old memories from before we met. But deep down, I knew the truth. These weren't remnants of the past, they were recent, alive in a way that felt raw and undeniable. Panic set in as reality crashed over me like a wave. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw the box across the room, but instead, I sat frozen, clutching the edges of the cardboard as if letting go would make the whole thing disappear. My mind replayed every moment of doubt, every unanswered question, every distant glance or unexplained absence. Suddenly, everything made sense, and yet nothing did. How could the man I loved, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, have kept something so huge from me? When Daniel came home later that evening, I was still sitting on the floor of the guest room, surrounded by the scattered pieces of his secret life. He froze in the doorway, his face pale as he took in the scene. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, finally, he whispered, "How did you find that?" I couldn't respond right away. My throat felt tight, choked with emotions I couldn't untangle. Anger, betrayal, confusion, they all swirled together until I could barely breathe. When I finally managed to speak, my voice was shaky but firm. "Who is Alex?" I asked, holding up one of the letters. Daniel flinched, as if the words physically hurt him. He sank onto the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated," he began, but I cut him off. "Don't give me that," I snapped, surprising myself with how sharp my tone sounded. "You owe me more than complicated. Who is he? And why are you hiding this from me?" He sighed heavily, avoiding my gaze. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost broken. "Alex is someone I met online. Someone who understands me in ways I can't explain. Someone I never meant to fall for." The room seemed to spin around me as his words sank in. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was deeper, more painful than that. Daniel wasn't just keeping secrets from me, he was hiding parts of himself, burying who he truly was beneath layers of fear and shame. "I don't understand," I said softly, tears streaming down my face now. "Why didn't you tell me? Why couldn't you trust me enough to share this?" His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw the weight he'd been carrying. "Because I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of losing you, of ruining everything we built. Scared of what people would think, of being judged or rejected. I thought I could push it aside, pretend it didn't exist." But I was wrong. As angry and hurt as I was, I couldn't ignore the pain in his voice. It was clear this wasn't easy for him either. He'd been trapped in his own prison of silence, unable to break free. Still, knowing that didn't erase the sting of betrayal. All I could think about was how many nights I'd spent wondering what was wrong, how many times I'd blamed myself for the distance between us. And now, here was the answer, staring me in the face. That night, after hours of talking, or rather, yelling, crying, and stumbling over apologies, we both retreated to separate corners of the house, too exhausted to continue. As I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized this discovery changed everything. Our marriage, our future, even my understanding of who Daniel was, it all felt uncertain now. But one thing was clear, pretending nothing was wrong was no longer an option. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was thick with unspoken words. Neither of us had slept much, how could we? The truth was out now, hovering between us like a storm cloud ready to burst. I knew we couldn't keep avoiding it, no matter how painful the conversation might be. So after a long, tense silence over breakfast, I finally said, "We need to talk." Daniel nodded, his face pale and drawn. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of everything had shrunk him overnight. We moved to the living room, sitting across from each other on opposite ends of the couch. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, filling the space where words should have been. "I'm sorry," Daniel said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. His hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles white. "I never wanted you to find out like this. So how did you want me to find out?" I shot back, sharper than I intended. My emotions were still raw, a tangled mess of anger, hurt, and confusion. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep pretending nothing was wrong?" He flinched at my tone but didn't look away. "I don't know," he admitted. Part of me hoped it would go away, that I could, I don't know, ignore it. But another part of me knew it wouldn't. I've been fighting this for years, trying to convince myself that I could live the life everyone expected of me. But it's not who I am, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change that. His honesty caught me off guard. It wasn't an excuse, it was a confession, raw and unfiltered. And as much as I wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the betrayal, I could see the pain in his eyes. This wasn't just about me, it was about him too. About the battles he'd fought alone, the secrets he'd carried for so long. "Why didn't you trust me?" I asked, softer this time. Tears welled up in my eyes again, but I didn't try to stop them. "I thought we were partners. I thought you could tell me anything. I wanted to," he said, his voice breaking. "But I was scared. Scared of losing you, of ruining what we had. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and the idea of hurting you, it was unbearable. I convinced myself that keeping it hidden was better than risking the truth." For a long moment, I just stared at him, trying to process everything he was saying. On one hand, I understood his fear. Society doesn't exactly make it easy to be honest about your true self, especially when it means challenging expectations or risking rejection. But on the other hand, his silence had cost us both dearly. Trust isn't something you can rebuild overnight, and right now, mine felt shattered. "Do you love him?" I asked suddenly, the question slipping out before I could stop it. It was something I'd been dreading, something I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer to. But I needed to know. Daniel hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I care about him," he said finally. "But it's not the same as what I feel for you. What we have, or had, is different. Real. He was an escape, a way to feel seen for who I really am. But you're my home." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless. Part of me wanted to believe him, to take comfort in the fact that he still cared about me. But another part wondered if it was too late, if the damage was already done. Could our relationship survive this? Did I even want it to? "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice trembling. "I feel like I don't even know you anymore. Everything I thought was real, it's all falling apart." "I get it," he said quietly. "And I won't blame you if you decide you can't forgive me. But I need you to know, I never meant to hurt you. All I've ever wanted is to be happy, to find a place where I belong. And for a while, I thought that place was with you. Maybe it still can be, if you're willing to try. The room fell silent again, the weight of his words hanging between us. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. Forgiveness didn't come easily, and neither did trust. But as I sat there, looking at the man I'd built a life with, I realized something: love isn't perfect. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes it hurts more than it heals. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth fighting for. I don't have answers, I said finally. But I think we owe it to ourselves, and to each other, to figure this out together. Daniel nodded, relief flickering across his face, though it was clear he didn't dare hope for too much yet. "Thank you," he whispered. "For staying, for listening, for giving me a chance." That night, as we lay in bed side by side, the distance between us felt smaller, though it was far from gone. There was still so much to unpack, so many questions left unanswered. But for the first time in weeks, or maybe months, I felt like we were facing the truth together. Whatever happened next, we'd face it as a team. Because love, I realized, isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when things get messy. Rebuilding trust wasn't something that happened overnight. In fact, it felt more like trying to piece together shards of glass, painful, delicate, and full of sharp edges that could cut you if you weren't careful. The days that followed our conversation were heavy with uncertainty. We tiptoed around each other, unsure of how to move forward but knowing we couldn't go back. At first, Daniel tried too hard. He became overly attentive, always asking if I was okay, if I needed anything, if there was something he could do to make things better. While I appreciated the effort, it only reminded me of how fragile things had become between us. His constant need for reassurance made me question whether he truly believed we could fix this, or if he was just afraid of losing me entirely. For my part, I struggled with conflicting emotions. Some days, I felt a flicker of hope, a small spark of the connection we used to share. Other days, anger and resentment bubbled to the surface, making it hard to look at him without feeling the sting of betrayal all over again. I hated how much energy it took to navigate these feelings, how every interaction felt loaded with unspoken tension. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, or rather, pretending to watch TV, I turned to him and said, "I need you to tell me everything. Not just about Alex, but about you asterisk. Who you are. What you've been hiding from me, and from yourself." He hesitated, his hands gripping the remote tightly. For a moment, I thought he might shut down, retreat into the same silence that had caused so much pain. But then he nodded, setting the remote aside. "Okay," he said softly. "But it's not going to be easy." And it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, we spent hours talking, really talking, for the first time in years. Daniel opened up about his struggles with his identity, about the shame and fear he'd carried since childhood. He told me about moments when he'd felt trapped between who he was and who he thought he was supposed to be. About how he'd convinced himself that marrying me was the answer, a way to prove he could live up to societal expectations. Listening to him was both heartbreaking and eye-opening. It forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about Daniel, but about myself. Had I ignored signs because it was easier? Had I pressured him, however unintentionally, to conform to an idea of what our relationship should look like? These questions weren't easy to sit with, but they were necessary if we wanted to move forward. In return, I shared my own fears and frustrations. I told him how lonely I'd felt during those months of silence, how I'd questioned my worth and blamed myself for the cracks in our marriage. Opening up like that wasn't easy, it left me feeling exposed and vulnerable, but it also brought us closer. For the first time, we were seeing each other not as partners in a perfect relationship, but as two imperfect people trying to figure things out together. As the weeks turned into months, small changes began to take root. Daniel started therapy, working through years of buried emotions and learning to embrace his true self. At first, I worried that this process would drive a wedge between us, that he'd realize he didn't want to stay. But instead, it seemed to give him clarity. He stopped apologizing for who he was and started showing up more authentically, not just with me, but with everyone in his life. Our dynamic shifted too. There were still moments of awkwardness, times when old habits threatened to creep back in. But we kept pushing through, determined to create something real and honest. We learned to communicate differently, not avoiding tough conversations, but leaning into them, even when they were uncomfortable. And while intimacy didn't return immediately, it eventually did, in a way that felt deeper and more meaningful than before. One day, as we walked through the park hand in hand, Daniel turned to me and said, "Thank you for staying." His voice was soft, filled with gratitude. Not just for sticking around, but for believing in us, even when I didn't believe in myself. "I'm not doing it for you," I replied, smiling faintly. "I'm doing it for us. Because despite everything, I still love you. And I think we're stronger now than we were before." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Life doesn't work like that. But it was a beginning, a chance to rewrite our story in a way that honored both of us. Together, we were learning that love isn't about perfection. It's about growth, acceptance, and the courage to face the truth, no matter how messy it gets. Months passed, and though the road we'd traveled was far from smooth, I began to notice something unexpected, a quiet strength growing between us. It wasn't the same love we'd started with, it was deeper, richer, and more complicated. But it was real. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Daniel had changed. Not overnight, but gradually, as he embraced who he truly was. He stopped hiding pieces of himself, not just from me, but from the world. He came out to his family, nervously at first, but their response surprised him. They weren't perfect about it, they stumbled over words and asked awkward questions, but they loved him anyway. Watching him find acceptance from those closest to him reminded me how powerful honesty can be. It doesn't erase pain or fear, but it creates space for healing. I changed too. The experience forced me to confront my own expectations, about relationships, about love, about what it means to be happy. I realized that I'd been holding onto an idealized version of marriage, one built on perfection rather than partnership. Letting go of that idea wasn't easy, but it freed me in ways I never expected. I learned to see Daniel not as someone who owed me anything, but as a person doing his best to navigate life alongside me. Our relationship looked different now. We didn't have all the answers, and some days were harder than others. There were still moments when doubt crept in, when old wounds threatened to reopen. But we faced them together, talking openly instead of retreating into silence. That made all the difference. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel turned to me with a smile. "Do you remember that day you found the box?" he asked. My stomach tightened at the memory, but I nodded. "How could I forget?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "It feels like another lifetime ago. Back then, I thought everything was falling apart. But looking back, maybe it was exactly what we needed. Maybe it saved us." His words caught me off guard, but they resonated deeply. In a strange way, he was right. That moment of discovery had shattered the illusion of our perfect life, forcing us to confront truths we'd both been avoiding. Without it, we might have stayed stuck in a cycle of denial, pretending everything was fine until it wasn't anymore. "You know," I said after a pause, "I used to think love meant never having doubts. Never feeling scared or unsure. But now I realize that's not true. Love is messy. It's learning how to forgive, how to accept each other, even when it hurts. It's choosing to stay, even when staying is hard." Daniel reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "And that's why I'll always choose you," he said simply. We didn't say much after that, letting the quiet settle around us. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. Our story hadn't unfolded the way I'd imagined it would, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the beauty wasn't in the destination, it was in the journey. In the end, this experience taught me something profound. Love isn't about finding someone who fits perfectly into your life. It's about building a life together, flaws and all, and embracing the messiness that comes with it. It's about showing up, even when things get hard, and trusting that the connection you share is worth fighting for. As I sat there with Daniel, watching the stars appear one by one, I knew we weren't the same people we'd been before. We were stronger, braver, and more resilient. Our story may not look like everyone else's, and that's exactly what makes it ours. If this story resonated with you, or if it made you reflect on your own relationships, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Stories like these thrive on connection, and I'd love to hear how it impacted you. And hey, if you're new here and want more raw, real-life stories that challenge, inspire, and connect us all, Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Every bit of support helps this channel grow and reach others who might need to hear these messages too. Lastly, if you know someone who could benefit from hearing this story, whether they're navigating their own struggles or simply looking for a reminder that love is worth fighting for, share this video with them. You never know how much it might mean to someone. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and being part of this community. Until next time, remember, life is messy, but it's also beautiful, and every chapter has something to teach us.